Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Valenti VOD. I'm your host, Chris Valenti, and we have a very special episode for you today. Yesterday, I was at the United Nations. I was a delegate for you, the people. I was actually a delegate for Bombshell Toe, which is like a organization, a nonprofit organization that advocates for denuclearization. Getting rid of all of our nuclear weapons, which is a very, very important cause. And when they reached out to give me an opportunity to, get my foot in the door at the UN, I jumped on it. All right. Got a whole lot of fucking cards. I got some connects. I took a whole bunch of notes, and I got this cool little fucking United Nations book. But before we get started, we have a lot to cover today. Okay, I'm going to be telling you about some of the stuff. I have an interview to show you. We're going to be covering some myths about the third nuclear age. We're going to talk about what the nuclear age is. We got a lot to cover, so before we do, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and donate $7,000 to the channel. We also have merch down below and a link so you can get 20% off of Ground News, which is what I used in order to filter through all of the bullshit and propaganda and come to my own conclusions. So make sure you check those out. But let's just dive right in, guys. I learned a lot yesterday. One of the big things that I learned about was this idea of the third nuclear age. Now, maybe some of you have heard this, maybe you haven't. I took some notes on some of the news outlets that have used this term. We've got Vox, we've got the Wall Street Journal, the BBC, right? And the thing is, even the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he called the third nuclear age bollocks. Now, if you don't speak British, that means he called it bullshit. Now, what even is the third nuclear age? The third nuclear age is a term used to describe the current era of increased nuclear tensions and the use of new technologies in nuclear warfare. So I actually got the opportunity to talk to this guy right here, Dr. Rhys Crilly, who's a researcher and a professor at University of Glasgow, and he wrote this incredible book. I believe it is called Debunking the 5 Myths of the Third Nuclear Age, or is that, no, that's Ward's book. Regardless, he's written some incredible fucking books following the lead of atomic anxiety, and I got to pick his brain a little bit. And something that he explained to me was that the first nuclear age, right, starts off in 45. The dropping of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And that age, it goes from 1945 to 1989, right? So in 45, the inception of the atom bomb, right? And the hydrogen bomb. And we start to see throughout the Cold War, the first nuclear age sees extreme growth in these nuclear arsenals, right? Especially between countries like the United States and the Soviet Union. And then later on during the Cold War, we see growth in China, right? So the first nuclear age is essentially the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of these nations developing thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons with payloads that are capable of just decimating about a quarter to a half of all human life, right? And once we hit 1989, with starting with the beginning of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is in 1991, we move into the second age, which is from 1990 to 2019. Now, this second age is sort of wrapped around the idea of how a lot of nations started to attempt denuclearization. Even the United States, we get the Iran nuclear deal where we convince Iran not to start developing nukes. We get some relationships with North Korea and try and get them to stop developing nukes. And we see, there's at least an effort where people are understanding that these weapons are so crazy. The idea of mutually assured destruction has gotten out of hand, right? And then the third age, which is what we're moving into now, is from 2020 to today, right? And this third age, it can be identified with things like a multipolar world, right, where there are conflicting interests all across the planet. And that ties into the second point, which is increased geopolitical tensions. We've got the war between Russia and Ukraine. We've got Israel's genocide against the Palestinians. We've got China encroaching on Taiwan. We've got European leadership panicking after Trump and Zelensky got into a spackle in the Oval Office, right? And then the third one is disruptive new technology. Things like hypersonic missiles, which we discussed in my previous episode of the Rabbit Hole. Hypersonic missile, or just hypersonic speed. It's something that can move like 3,000 miles per hour. That's 50 miles per minute. Just insane speeds, undetectable by radar, invisible to the naked eye. Also, low-yield, dual-capable bombs or missiles, which is, what the idea that you would know as a tactical nuke, which is ridiculous. And I wanted to bring this up to show you exactly what the fuck a tactical nuke is. You see, a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon have explosive yields measured in the kilotons, ranging from 1 kiloton to about 50 kilotons. Now, what's important about this is that the bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima had 15 kilotons, right? So that means that these tactical weapons, tactical nukes, right, could be 2 to 4 times stronger. That's 50 kilotons. Could be 2 to 4 times stronger than the bombs that we dropped on Hiroshima, and they are considered a tactical nuke, right? So that's, and then also AI targeting, right? Autonomous targeting systems, which we've also talked about in previous episodes of the Rabbit Hole and Valenti VOD, where no longer are we going to have men or women or human beings designating these targets and confirming that it is okay to strike it with, regardless whether it's a nuclear weapon or not. We now are starting to develop these autonomous targeting systems, AI targeting systems, who are going to attempt to differentiate between a target and a civilian, a combatant and a regular person, and it's quite literally Terminator type shit, right? Number 4, we've got the collapse of arms control. This is what we see in this third age. So, and that's something we're starting to see, is that, we no longer have like a strong movement against nuclearization, right? In the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, there were very strong public movements. People were in the streets, but nowadays people are much more focused on individualistic, things. Like people are focusing on anti-abortion stuff and trans stuff and, I don't know, sending billions to Ukraine. There's a lot of things that people are focused on. And to be honest, this is quite literally the most important thing about all of us. I don't know if you're a hate watcher, but if you voted for Trump, you still need air to breathe. You still need water to drink. You still need a planet to live on. Doesn't matter. The nuclear bomb does not care who you voted for. It doesn't give a shit what side you're on. And that will lead us to our next point, which is that there are a couple incredible myths regarding these modern nuclear weapons, right? And one of my favorite myths is that these weapons are even useful. And this is something that Ward Wilson, let me bring him up here. Ward Wilson is the incredible man. I have the privilege of interviewing him, and you will be seeing this interview during this video. It'll come up soon. Ward Wilson is an author of this incredible book called 5 Myths of the Nuclear Age, 5 Myths about Nuclear Weapons, right? And during my interview, I got to pick his brain a little bit, and something that I never even really considered is, going back to this low-yield megaton bomb, is that these weapons are quite literally useless in combat. And think about it. Why haven't we used one? Why haven't we used one in combat? Well, it's because if you think about the average distance between frontline troops, say like Russia and Ukraine, pretty sure the average distance between the Russians and the Ukrainians, on the front lines is something like 80 yards, right? So if you used one of these low-yielding tactical nukes, let's call it 30 kilotons, right? So twice the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sure, you're going to destroy the enemy forces, but you're also going to murder your own forces. And then, depending on which direction the fucking wind is blowing, there's going to be radioactive fallout that will slaughter all of the civilians and destroy the land. Right? So let's just say you drop a tactical nuke on the front line in order to claim, the enemy's land. Well, congratulations, dipshit. Now you're the king of bones. What the fuck are you? Oh, I want the minerals. Well, now all the minerals are radioactive. Oh, we want the agriculture. Well, now all the fucking plants are poisoned. Oh, we want the people, right? Well, guess what? You fucking killed them all, right? So when it comes to these weapons even being useful in war, decisive in war, they're not. And a big problem with that is, the modern social construct around nuclear weapons. When you get a 25 kill streak in Call of Duty, you get a fucking tactical nuke. Good job, kid. You got a nuke. You won the game. You didn't win shit. You just killed yourself. You just killed yourself, right? Same thing, we got games like Fallout, right, where people are like big Fallout fans. And the thing is, the unfortunate reality is Fallout is a beautiful depiction of what nuclear holocaust would look like. It's child's play. It's cute. You know, in reality, it would be much, much worse than Fallout. You think death claws are scary? No, they're not. How about 2 billion people dead within the first 2 hours of a global thermonuclear holocaust? Isn't that a little bit scary, Barry? But anyway, let's move on a little bit. Let's keep on talking about some of the shit that I learned during this. So another thing that I learned during this, and this is, again, something that Ward really taught me, is that Japan did not surrender because we dropped the nuclear bombs on them, or the atom bomb. That's not true whatsoever, okay? I took some notes during this. You see, the Japanese surrendered because the Soviets entered their war, right? And this is something that we know because the Japanese said this themselves. They had multiple meetings, and during one of these meetings in 44, I believe, they said, listen, if the Soviets enter this conflict, we have to surrender. Our invasion of China and our war against the United States is only possible if we don't have a third front opening up, right, against the Soviets. And that's exactly what happened after, the Germans surrendered. The Soviets started moving in to get ready for the invasion of Japan, right? So the Soviets declare war, the Japanese start to discuss surrender, and another thing that we learned is that, people will say, like, oh, we bombed their cities, we bombed their civilians and forced them into submission. The Japanese didn't give a fuck about us bombing their civilians. We had been firebombing Tokyo for fucking years. We had been dropping bombs all over their fucking civilians, and they didn't give a shit. Never once did they even make an attempt to say, hey, please stop bombing our fucking civilians, So that's the thing, it's a myth. These are nuclear myths. And another one that we notice is that even George H.W. Bush said that he doesn't want these nuclear weapons. He was like, there's no safety living in a world where we have these nuclear weapons that are pointing at each other. And even Ronald Reagan agreed. And it brings you to the talking point that a lot of people have, which is like the condom theory. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. We got mutually assured destruction. These weapons are so big that no one will launch them. Well, if no one's going to launch them, why the fuck do we need them? And if no one's going to launch them, why are we doing tests like simulations on how to use them and when to use them and what would happen if we used them? Why are we preparing for it? We wouldn't have to be spending all of these tax dollars on these fucking weapons if we didn't fucking have them. And the thing is, nuclear technology can be used for so much good. Nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants, nuclear energy is phenomenal. Why the fuck do you need to have a bomb that could blow up the moon? Who are you, Gru? Who are you, Gru? But, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, another myth that we got here is deterrence, and something that Ward was talking about, or Professor Wilson, or Dr. Wilson, or whatever fucking he wants to be called. How you doing, Ward, if you're watching this, is this deterrence myth. All humans are fallible, and that's true. Nobody's perfect except for me. And the thing is if humans aren't perfect, then so will be our systems. And this is what we're seeing in the United States right now with the fucking collapse of democracy, but so will all of our systems, including our nuclear deterrence systems, right? We're relying on man to make these weapons, and we're relying on man to make sure that they don't go off accidentally. Shout out to, this one guy that I met. I'm not going to tell you his name, but he actually works. His name is Anthony, I believe. He works on making sure that these nuclear weapons do not go off on their own, because that's a genuine fucking issue with them, right? So the problem with that is that if it's reliant on humans to make sure that these weapons will not go off, then that means that they will eventually go off. And that the entire idea of mutually assured destruction is just smoke and mirrors. The reason why we have all these nuclear weapons is because of the amount of money that the military-industrial complex makes by creating these weapons. What do you think, it's fucking cheap to make a nuclear bomb? No, they're getting government grants. They're getting billions of dollars to create these weapons, right? But, what can we do about that, right? What can we do? Well, we can be more vocal. Young people can open up about this. We can start a movement online. We can start a hashtag, We need to get rid of these fucking nuclear weapons. I want children one day, and I unfortunately have grown up in this era of atomic anxiety, and I don't want my children to fear being fucking annihilated by a firebomb that nobody can do anything to prevent. Again, I want to remind you to like, comment, subscribe, and go to the merch store and grab yourself a Valentiverse mug. God, that's good fucking coffee. So, I got the opportunity to ask a question. And, essentially all these people, they were like, hi, Rebecca, Washington Post. Hi, Tommy, New York Post, New York Times. And then they got to me and I go, hi, Chris Valenti, Valenti Videos, my YouTube channel. And I said, something I run into when I'm arguing for denuclearization is the problem that we, have in these convos, which is that we don't know if our enemies are having these conversations. I know that we're having this conversation. I'm here. I just don't know if our so-called enemies, the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, are they talking about denuclearization? Because if they're not, then what the fuck are we doing here? And that's the thing, is that the answer to that question was a non-answer. It's that somebody has to start. We don't know if the Russians and the Chinese are doing this stuff. They probably aren't, right? But if we don't start, then how can we expect anybody else to follow through? I mean, if a nation like Germany starts a denuclearization program, nobody's going to give a fuck. Why? They don't have nukes. You need a nation like the United States or Israel or the Soviet Union, Russia, fucking acting like it, Russia or China to give up their nuclear weapons first and see how the world reacts to that. And I know that sounds lunatic, but it's the only possible fucking outcome. Now, what I'm going to do is take you over to my interview with Mr. Ward Wilson. Great interview, Mr. Ward, if you're watching this. Thank you again for your time. And then I'll bring you guys back just to say a little bit something at the tail end, and we'll wrap it up here, all right? I'll catch you after the interview. It's short. It's only about What's up, guys? We're here with Ward Hayes Wilson, not Deadpool. Ward Hayes Wilson. And he's an author. We were just having an incredible conference regarding denuclearization. And Ward, do you want to introduce yourself at all any further than that?
Not really. I run a small grassroots organization called Realist Revolt. So the website is realistrevolt.org.
So, yeah, definitely head over to that website, guys. But something that I wanted to ask you, Ward, is about something you brought up during that conference was the fact that these nuclear weapons that we have today, they're quite literally useless in the battlefield because of how deadly they are. Could you go into a little bit more elaboration on that?
Yeah, it seems contradictory, but, we always imagine that size equals better. Mm-hmm. Like if you bring a knife to a fight, I bring a sword, and so I win. But at some point, that wears off, and nuclear weapons are too big to be useful. So the average battlefield, the front lines are like a third of a mile to a few yards apart. Mm-hmm. So you're pretty close to your adversaries. A typical 10 kiloton nuclear weapon, and so just for reference, 10 kilotons is 2/3 the size of the Hiroshima bomb, and in the majority of Russian land-based battlefield weapons are 10 kilotons.
Okay.
So
that would be the idea of like a tactical nuke?
Yeah, they're called tactical nukes, which
is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So you use that weapon, a 10 kiloton bomb makes an explosion with severe effects, a mile across, and diminishing effects out to about 5 miles. If you're a third of a mile from your adversary, you drop that bomb on your adversary, you're going to kill some of your own people. Not only,
and to mention the fact that if you are at war for that land, say bye-bye, the land is now gone. It's useless, you're the king of ashes, And I think it's really important because, in the video games we grew up playing, in Call of Duty, in Fallout, in Battlefield, these nuclear weapons are used and portrayed as the end of the fight, right? Every time you call in a nuke, the game ends. That's not reality. You call in a nuke, the game starts. And it's a game that you can't fucking win unless you don't play. War games. You won't get it. You're too young. But he'll get it. And your parents will get it. But another point that I want to talk about is I think that a lot of people nowadays, when I talk to young people about denuclearization, they'll bring up the old condom saying, which is like, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Reason being, you and I may be having this conversation, but I don't know if a Russian professor and a Russian influencer are having this conversation. I hope they are, but something I run into is people say, well, we don't know if our enemies are getting rid of it, so why the hell should we?
Well, so the answer to that is, I'm not advocating we get rid of any nuclear weapons to begin with. Mm-hmm. The thing that bothers me is the mythology around nuclear weapons that says, oh, they're the biggest, that give us the power of gods, blah, 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 blah. And that's what I think is holding us back from eliminating nuclear weapons, because everyone thinks they're,
That if you have one, you're a god.
yeah, one dictator with a single bomb could conquer the world. No way. So, what was I saying? Was I saying anything interesting?
Well, you were talking about mythology,
Oh,
right? And
okay.
something you even brought up during the presentation was, Oppenheimer, he said, I am become death, destroyer of worlds, right?
Right.
Quote from Shiva, god of
Yeah.
death. And it's like, that's cheesy, first of all, nerd. But second of all, you're not a god. If
Right.
anything, you're like a fucking demon,
Well, the statement is wrong twice. First, the destroyer of worlds, well, nuclear weapons can't actually destroy our world, much less Mars or Jupiter or whatever. There are 800 million people living in the southern hemisphere with no nuclear weapons and no targets. So
True. They'd be fine. Or not fine, but...
Well, you might get some nuclear winter effects or something, but the southern hemisphere is going to survive. So destroyer of worlds, not so much. And then the first thing he says is, now I am become death. Well, actually, no, because the weapons don't give you the power of gods
Yes.
either. And we know this because Oppenheimer had his security clearance taken away, and he ended up a bitter retiree at the Princeton.
The janitors are coming out, and I'm running out of iPhone storage, so we're going to call it there in the interview. There will be more interviews throughout the week. I'll be in and out of the UN. Again, thank you so much, Ward Wilson. Check out the name of the book. What's the name of the book again?
So it is possible, a future without nuclear weapons.
And it is possible, ladies and gentlemen. It truly is. Never stop fighting for it, all right? I love you. Have a good one. Keep hope alive. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mr. Ward Wilson. You should get his book, 5 Myths About Nuclear Weapons. It's incredible. I got my own copy on the way. Here's the cover if you're curious, 5 Myths About Nuclear Weapons. But in the meantime, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this special episode of Valenti VOD. I've got a whole bunch of videos from the UN on Shorts, on Instagram, on TikTok. Go check them out. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, donate $7,000 to the channel, buy some merch, and do all the shit that you got to do. All right? All right. I love you. Never stop fighting.